and invite a few panellists up onto the stage to address the issue of the economics of sustainability. So I'm going to chair the session. I'm also going to ask for contributions from the floor in terms of questions you'd like the panel to address. So if you can be thinking about those in the next minute or two, and I'll take a quick straw poll of what issues you'd like us to discuss. So briefly, for those that I've not met earlier today, I'm Darren Messon, I'm Managing Director for Certification from the Carbon Trust. Joining us on the panel, we've got three speakers from today's session who you've already heard from, and so it's an opportunity to put some questions to challenge them perhaps on what they said or things that weren't covered. So Martin Chilcott, CEO from 2 Degrees, Mike Hanson, who's the Sustainable Business Director for Baxter Story, and Mark Pettigrew, who's the Agricultural Sustainability Manager for PepsiCo. Two other speakers, I think Clarice Camacho may not be here. Clarice is the Global Procurement Manager for Diageo, but we'll leave a space open for Clarice should she join us. But last but certainly not least, Stuart Goldsmith is the Senior Buyer of Packaging for Nomad Foods Europe. So our brief is to discuss the economics of sustainability, but can I just check before we get started, are there issues that people would like us to address while we're up here? Anything that you feel hasn't been covered that we should have covered or that you'd like us to get stuck into? While you're thinking about that, let me just say what I thought we might go through. We're going to talk a little bit around what we now see as the true economic opportunities and risks for sustainability, particularly in the context of Brexit and the new president-elect. A couple of us also had a little chat at the break and thought that we ought to get some more around social issues back onto this conversation, particularly the Slavery Act, but also considerations about European Union workforce and mobility of labour and what impact there might be as a result of Brexit on those issues. Can I just say, are there any issues you want us to address? If not, we'll get stuck straight into those questions. If you do have a question as we go through, please just put your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you, and then we can lob some issues into the mix as we go. What I'd like to do initially, gentlemen, in the absence of Clarice, is ask each of you just to say a few words by way of introduction. But could you, in your introduction, just say, reflecting on today's conversations and the presentations that you've heard, what do you see as the major economic opportunities for the food and drink manufacturing industry, and also economic risks, given the situation we're now in, which is coming out of Europe, having a new American president, having still a lot of economic uncertainty in the mix, but also, I think, perhaps a lot of the low-hanging fruit around sustainable development having been captured, and some really difficult challenges finding the next round of opportunities. Would anybody like to kick us off?
So I've got the microphone.
Go for it, Stuart.
Just speak. Hi, everybody. My name is Stuart Goldsmith, and I'm the head of packaging buying for the procurement function at Nomad Foods, who basically are the umbrella company for Igloo and Birdseye and Findus, so probably people know that brand better than Nomad Foods themselves. In reflection, obviously, with regards to all the various speeches today, some of the thoughts that I've had, one of the challenges that we have as a business, obviously being very much obviously fish orientated, the big thing that's really affected us as a business has been the effect of the exchange rate following the Brexit. Obviously, we spend something in the region of £400 million on fish each year, of which everything is traded in US dollars. So you can imagine the hole we've now had to try and fill. And obviously, it was well documented in the BBC. We got obviously tarnished with, I think, with ourselves and Walkers after the Unilever discussion, the fact that the fish finger price was going to go up. So we've had various discussions. Thankfully, obviously, we've seen the dollar exchange rate slightly get better, a little bit better, but there is still, a massive amount of uncertainty both in the US dollar, but also on the euro as well, in terms of the vulnerability and instability of that particular those currencies. In terms of sustainability, for me, if we think about, my role is buying all the packaging for the business, and clearly we have a great trust message for our product itself, i.e. the fish and the vegetables and the poultry and so on. One of the things I think that we really need to harness as a business, it's something that I'm driving very forward, is about trust messaging for our cartons and our bags. At the end of the day, you know, where is that product being sourced? Is it being sourced locally, responsibly, ethically, and so on and so forth, depending on our manufacturing location. So that's one of the big challenges. And as I say, it's one of the opportunities that we have as a business, is to really look at where can we actually buy these products. You know, commercially, it has to be commercially viable, because, as we said earlier, I think, is that, you know, if we said to a consumer, oh, by the way, the cost of this particular carton or bag is going to be costing you an extra 10%, at the end of the day, if we don't get that message over to the consumer, it's actually going to be really, really hard to sell, both into the consumer but also into the retailer, which is my background as well. Just winding back a little bit, I've been in the packaging industry for around about 20 years, having spent sometime about 20 years at Sainsbury's, then at Dairy Crest, and now at Nomad Foods. So they're my initial thoughts, but I'm sure there will be more. But please, you know, if you had any questions, please feel free to fire them at me and the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we move on to Mark?
Okay. Yeah, Mark Pettigrew, PepsiCo Agricultural Sustainability Manager for Europe. I echo a lot of that. If you consider that a lot of our oils, sunflower oils, rapeseed oils, packaging materials are bought in dollars, then we have to report back to the US in dollars. There's a lot of people running around the corridors at the moment with calculators and watching TV screens. You know, it's absolutely live. I believe that because we source locally with our agricultural products, we're a global company, but everything is sourced locally. In terms of those raw materials, there's going to be a big impact on the cost of things like fertilizers and other inputs. But I think, you know, we can weather the storm. Sustainability, actually, the way that we've been working with growers, reducing carbon footprint, which is reducing, you know, energy and reducing costs, by the way, is actually where we should be and where a lot of other companies should be looking to the future. I think de-risking the supply chain is a bit of a cliche, but it's very important. We are addressing, you know, where we should be, where we should be buying new businesses, if you like, because if you look at our track record, it's almost an acquisition every year, you know, and I was part of that team that descended on a company that we just bought, and we had to, for want of another word, Pepsify them. So, you know, that's kind of where we're going to buy, what we're going to do, what we're going to grow, where we're going to grow it. And I think all of our, the whole of the supply chain team is just really going to have a rethink. In terms of this show, I think over the years, I have noticed that there are some amazing presentations being made, and people are doing some fantastic work. It's gone from being, why should we do it, to how should we do it, and now what's the best practice to do it. You know, people are really tightly focused, and we are definitely, in sustainable agriculture, we're shoulder to shoulder. A lot of it's pre-competitive. So working in the countryside, with the communities and working with you know, saving water, you know, it's all very much pre-competitive, and it's a nice space to work in. It's a very exciting space to work in. So I think I'll stop there. I can go on.
Thanks, Mark. Excuse me. I don't know if anyone was here that heard me speak earlier, but 80 to 90% of the products, food food and beverage products that we buy are sourced in the UK. So we don't buy anything in dollars, thankfully. Although obviously that may be changing, and we are UK centric. So impact on us so far on Brexit and also the president-elect has been minimal. But what is interesting is I think that the impact it not necessarily has on us or has on us indirectly, because the nature of our business, we work on client sites. So we deliver the catering within the staff restaurants, the cafes, the delis and the coffee bars within organisations such as RBS, Microsoft, BT, and so on. So actually, and they're clearly global businesses, and so the impacts on them and the impacts on their resource and their financing are significant. And we have to work hard to mitigate their risk and actually reduce their costs as depending on the type of contract. But actually, it means that not only do we have to be nimble ourselves, but also nimble on behalf of our clients, which is an interesting take. In terms of this type of event, this event specifically, and other events that are like it, there's more, and I completely agree with Mark. It's moved on from this is what we should be doing, as to right, we're all doing it, but how can we get better at it? And I think that's absolutely key. And I think that absolutely is a perfect segue into my colleague sitting on my left.
Going last and knowing least about food for the people I take on the panel with me. So I'm going to answer in three areas. So one is about Brexit first and the Brexit impact. So I am confused, bamboozled by the contradictions that we have coming out of Brexit, that are economic realities where we've got to get round pegs into square holes. So let's just take a couple of them. So we have an artificial inflation. I say artificial because normally inflation is driven by demand. And normally it's driven, in the context we're talking about at the moment, by rising salaries. So you have rising income, rising demand, prices go up. But we don't have that. We have a short-term artificial spike because of uncertainty in the market and devaluation of the pound against the dollar. And as we know, 50% of our food is imported and traded in dollars. We don't have rising salaries. So therefore, the inflation that's coming through on food will really properly hurt the consumer, which means there will be falling demand for those products, food products that are most affected, in a way I think we haven't seen before, okay? Because it's not related to rising incomes. It's not as if the consumer can just take this on board. They cannot. Now, I think there are some profound political implications of that to do with the fact that come May, June of next year, there are a lot of people whose incomes have not risen for 10 years, which is one of the reasons why they kicked back against the establishment and voted Brexit, who are going to find themselves squeezed on some really basic things which are important around food. Okay, so there's that one scenario. Now, that creates an opportunity for food, obviously, produced in Britain, which is great. So now we come to the next round peg and square hole, is that who's going to produce it? Because, of course, our agricultural harvesting and you guys know this better than I do, and the manufacturing of food is largely with an immigrant workforce. So we can't take advantage of the weak pound to boost our home industries unless we allow pretty flexible migration in a workforce. So how the current government works their way around these things, I don't know, because it seems to me there's contradictions at every corner. So that's that bit. The other bit is just about the general sustainability, the economics of sustainability as a general. And I think I have 2 points. So one is, I think we are working our way through currently with what I'd call the tactical economic benefits of sustainability. So these are the taking cost out as you take carbon out type of arguments, which I now think are well-founded, and colleagues on my right here, their businesses are doing a great job around that. I think we're going to be moving into a world, and some businesses already are, but it will become more commonplace, where strategic investment decisions will be taking sustainability front and foremost. Do you buy from these particular producers in this region? Do we acquire that company over there? How do we manage the potential of big shocks which destroy our businesses overnight, either because of reputation damage or because of destruction to the supply chain and access to, and scarcity of supply. And I think we're moving into a world where we will use sustainability as a lens to make strategic investment decisions. And I think that's a very different thing from the tactical efficiency, productivity gains that we're currently looking at.
Thank you. I'm going to lob another spanner into the works with an observation that a couple of weeks ago was the 10th anniversary of the Stern Report. And you probably recall that the Stern Report concluded that the economic cost of climate change could be between 5 and 10% of GDP, but the economic remedy for climate change would be around 1 to 2% of GDP. So the point was to establish a clear business case for addressing climate change. And yet, in the last 10 years, global emissions have gone up. And interestingly, this year, the data came out, I think it was in March, April time, UK consumption emissions rose for the first time in, I think it was 5 years. So consumption emissions being the emissions associated with everything in this country that we consume. So I'm wondering what the panel's views are. I'm not going to pick on everybody. I'm just interested in views, if anybody's got them. But what do we actually have to do to break the back of these issues? We talk a lot about sustainability. We say there's a business case. And yet our emissions keep rising. Our water use and resource use continues to rise. And we saw in Martin's slides earlier, there is this huge challenge of population growing and consumption growing, but emissions and resource use having to come down. So productivity has to go through the roof. The figures you quoted from the McKinsey report were a 90% reduction in like-for-like emissions. What needs to change for us to make a step change in these areas?
I think that engagement and realization and then measurement and communication, if you like. Don't hide your head in the bucket of sand. Really just face up to the facts. We have regular meetings to discuss our carbon footprint within the company. And of course, every time we bring out a new product, a new line, nowadays, the carbon footprint of that is looked at very carefully. So we probably shot ourselves in the foot a couple of years ago as a global company when we bought the biggest dairy in the world, which is Wimbledon over in Russia. And dairy is going to play a very big part in what Pepsi does over the coming years. But can you imagine what that's done to our carbon footprint? I mean, I know you can, but it's just you've got to say, okay, so what are we going to do? Well, in my little world, where I've been looking at just the potatoes in the UK, they're all British potatoes for Walkers. Productivity is the key. So we've got new varieties and we grow them in a way. The yields for the farmer are up by an average of 5%, which is a really key part of what you do. So it's all these little incremental pieces. And I know my colleagues in packaging and in the oils, they're all looking at ways in which they can come to the table and say, this is how we are improving things. But really, it's get it on the agenda, as a business. And I'm glad to say that, from the very top, from Inda Nui, who's leading our sustainability charge, no one can escape from it. It's like, well, what are you doing about it? So all of the managers, I guess like Unilever started a decade or so ago, we've got that as part of our business planning. And actually, probably I should have said in my earlier address that Indra has gone on social media talking about Trump, talking about, you don't talk to women like that, and we don't want to be talked to like that, and I think it's very good. I love to read that my boss way up is saying things like that, and she's also making sure that we are doing everything the right way.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on what needs to change for us to make a material impact?
I think for me, both on the business side and personal side. We're doing these great things within the industry, FMCG and so on. But if we actually don't effectively communicate the message to our consumers, they actually can't make an informed choice about what they're actually buying and what they're not going to buy. And I think the key bit for me here is about how do we effectively communicate the points you've just raised there in terms of, we are affecting the various emissions and so on and so forth. What are we going to do about it? Various campaigns, and I think as a food body, we should be getting together. We're doing some great work behind the scenes on the packaging side, as we alluded to. But obviously, we get shot in the neck when the likes of Birdseye and Walkers say all of a sudden we've got to put the prices up, and that's basically the big headline. So it's actually for me it's about the communication, and it really is an understanding for the consumer to say, look, this is a choice, because ultimately the consumers within a store have a choice, and the clear economics piece is obviously very vital. We are, as a business, we are just 100% a purely branded house in UK, and that's obviously got some massive concerns within our business currently, where frozen foods is obviously on the decline, continually be on the decline. Obviously, we have the growth of the discounter, but at this point in time, we are saying as a business that we still believe in our strategy, getting behind our key brands, and we will not go into private label in the UK. But for me, it's never say never, because at the end of the day, we have factories that we have to produce fish and we have to produce vegetables and so on. We have farmers that are attached to our business. We can't just throw the peas away because we can't put them in a Birdseye pack, for instance. So we have to be a bit more sensible than just say, well, we're not a private label player. But for me, as I say, the communication piece, for the consumer understanding, this is the packaging that you're using, or this is the product. It's got great provenance. It's got a great story to tell. Then we should be really getting behind that, as I say, as an industry, in my view.
Thank you. To make a material impact, I think we've heard today, and I mentioned it earlier also about the carrot and stick, and I think we need a bit more stick. If you look at, it works. If you look at carrier bags, for example, single-use carrier bags, use has dropped by 82% since the 5p tax came in. It is quite incredible how the difference that's made. If you look back at when the economic crash in 2008, vehicle fuel usage and emissions arising from that plummeted. And the reason it did that is because it was more expensive, and that's what makes the difference. And actually, I think it's time we need to stop. And it may be politically unpalatable, and that's quite a big thing to say. In that politically, we have a fixed 5-year term. Well, a couple of years in, they start thinking about being re-elected again. So actually, don't want to upset the electorate. Well, actually, I think we need to make some hard choices, and I think we need some more stick to make things really make a difference.
Just quickly on that, is that not something that the industry itself can self-regulate?
Potentially, but I think it's one of the biggest challenge around that is that who wants to jump first?
Mm-hmm.
And no one wants to jump first. If someone did, then everyone else would potentially follow, but no one will, because they run the risk of being isolated and thinking, well, actually, I wish I hadn't done that, and then you can't backtrack. So I think it's going to come from the top.
Yeah, thank you. Martin?
This is a phenomenal challenge. Just absolutely huge. And at the end of the day, it will only happen because the system changes. That's not to say that the incremental efficiency drives of individual business is not important. It's actually extremely important. Let me come back to in a second why I think it's so important. But we can only do this by decarbonising generation, decarbonising transport, moving to a circular economy, improving storage around renewables. There are some really big pieces that have to happen. Now, the efforts of business in the meantime is absolutely essential, because it gives business the moral power to make a lot of noise and put pressure on government to isolate that bit of business which is recalcitrant, which is inevitably the energy businesses, because it's not in their interest, and to put pressure on them for the political changes we need. I don't know how many of you were in Paris, but the voice of businesses like these at the Paris negotiations were audible all around France. It was an extraordinary pressure from the non-energy businesses to get that agreement. It was extraordinary. I've never seen anything like that. And business had a moral authority because they were sorting out their own backyard, they were sorting out their own supply chains, they were driving their own efficiencies, they were recognizing the risks. And because they were doing those things, they could turn around to government and say, no, don't listen to ExxonMobil, don't listen to the Koch brothers, don't listen to the entrenched powers around our carbon energy system. We need this changing. And we got people signing up. There are only 92, I think it's something like 92 organisations in the world which are responsible for over 50% of all emissions. And most of those are government-owned. And they're the petroleum companies and the coal companies. And so the private sector business has to make its best efforts, its very best efforts, at improving its own efficiencies and getting its house in order, because then I think it has real authority in influencing those negotiations, and we need those negotiations to succeed.
Interesting, thank you. I want to get the discussion on to social issues, if I may, because that was brought up by a few people on the floor as well as panellists. And I just set the context. We have a new Slavery Act in the UK. We have a rising minimum wage. We face the prospect of movement of labour restrictions through whatever changes we make in the Brexit negotiations, let alone simply the concern that people might have about whether to move to this country or to think of themselves as people that move around. So fundamentally, isn't labour cost just going to go through the roof in the course of the next 5 or 10 years, and doesn't that represent a material threat for the industry? Any thoughts? Yes.
Absolutely right. It's one of our big concerns because the teams that grade our potatoes and wash our potatoes and store our potatoes, I mean, they used to be, I've been in the business for 40 years, and they used to be local people. They probably are local people now, but you know, they come from Eastern Europe or Asia and do a fantastic job. But if they have to go, and if labour becomes more expensive, then yes, I mean, that's something that we'll have to face. But wow, that's not just for crisps, that's going to be for all our vegetables, all our fruits and things. So it's going to be huge. But taking care of labour is just as important. And because we have there is a possible risk that modern slavery or something like that will happen. It's funny how it gets the attention of the senior management straight away. This is real brand damager, you know. But we've just appointed a person who's now looking at modern slavery. She's a lawyer and she's on the team. So I've been interviewed by her. And, you know, that is a very important aspect of what we're doing. And it's quite interesting. We had big meetings with all agronomists across Europe, and I asked them on a questionnaire, what's the main thing that, you know, you're concerned about? And actually, as you would imagine, soil health, availability of water, price of this, that, and the other. Very few came up and saw this as a major concern. And then we showed some numbers of what's happening in their countries. You know, not particularly on our farmers, but, you know, so there is a risk. And boy, oh boy, there's a risk in the UK, in East Anglia in particular. You know, so again, it's like, well, face it. And I believe that companies like ours, we big companies, have the responsibility. The buck stops here. You know, your supply chain stretches out a long way. And ingredients, okay? So we know where our potatoes are coming from, we know where our corn's coming from, we know where our oats is coming from, but flavorings, ingredients, other things like that, you know, we really are making our suppliers face up to it. We've not had any shocks yet, but, you know, it's just like, this is what the problem is, and fix it. with us.
Yep.
Yeah, just building on Mark's point there is that for us as well as a business is really the challenges that we face is that there's a whole manufacturing footprint that we have to look after within Europe, where we have 9 processing plants. One of those is in East Anglia, in Lowestoft, a big plant. But it's actually making sure that we are manufacturing products in the right place at the right time. But having said that, we have a big co-pack operation where quite a lot of our products on fish is co-packed straight, or either at sea or actually in China. So we need to be very, very careful about the messaging. The trust messaging goes back to that in terms of exactly what we're actually buying from where. But for me as well, but having said that, the opportunity is to actually make sure that we do actually manufacture the right products in the right place at the right time. So, if we had a situation where all of a sudden the modern slavery situation in the UK got to a point where, in actual fact, our plant in Lowestoft was becoming totally uneconomic to produce whatever it produces currently, or even the other way around, we are currently in the process of re-looking at our total manufacturing model, looking at making sure, as we discussed just then, is looking at, it's not only about the fish, it's not only about the packaging, it's also where the ingredients is coming, and so it's looking at the whole bill of material for our product and saying, okay, right, is it being responsibly sourced? And that means, not only the item, but also how the employees are treated, and we've had to actually, there is a cost associated with that because we're now having to employ more auditors to go and audit these facilities on a much, much more regular basis going forward now, because we have as we said there, we have a duty of care. We're big brand owners here, and we have a duty of care within the UK and certainly across Europe to make sure that we are producing product that is actually the right quality, produced in the right conditions by employees.
Thank you. Can I just check, are there any questions from the audience at this point? If not, I've got one more question I want to put to the panel, and then I think we'll move to wrap up. My final question just to the panel, again, not to everybody, but whoever wants to comment, is just to set some context. So we face some lengthy and protracted discussions around Brexit in this country in the coming couple of years. We have an agreement at Paris, which the UK government has signed up to, for the decarbonisation of the world economy, to get to a hopefully 1.5 degree trajectory. We have a whole series of legislation around social enactment, as well as some resource constraints, like, for example, water scarcity over the long term in eastern England. So given that context, thinking about our subject matter today, which is about the sustainable development of the food and beverage manufacturing industry, what are the key things over the next 5 years you'd like to see happen, done differently, things that might change? Anything in that time frame, if you think about we're going to walk out of here today and get on with our jobs in this industry, what are the sort of changes you think we ought to be aiming for?
Clear, consistent messages from government and DEFRA.
DEFRA?
DEFRA.
Yeah.
When I look at the changes that have been on the feed-in tariffs, for green electricity, and I sit down with growers, suppliers, and basically they do not have the message. It's not getting across. We bring the message to them, and my vision is that the farmers, the suppliers, take that message over and actually come to us and say, this is what we're doing. And with our engagement process, we get there, but you can't blame them because in their industry, they're not getting a clean message, a clear message, and possibly within that message are the costs involved. I think that really would, get people focused.
So I have a controversial view on this.
Great.
So, the hard line view on Brexit puts our economy at such a disadvantage that the only way those who are pro it can see them getting to this Albion of free trade, this new bastion of free trade which is leading the world, is to deregulate massively in the UK. And I think that's one of the most upsetting and frightening hidden agendas of the likes of Liam Fox and Ian Duncan Smith and David Davis, is their desire to deregulate, which is not good, as we know, at all for sustainability. But it is actually the only way they can deal with this square peg in a round hole and deal with how you can have a strong growth economy, at the same time restrict the immigration you need to drive that economy. So they're putting us at a massive disadvantage in the short to medium term, and the only way they can get out of it is deregulation. So, and that is my fear. So therefore, what do I want to see happen? And this is the controversial bit. I want us in pain, short, sharp pain, for about 6 months because of inflation, and I want the lies on which their agenda was built to be destroyed and discredited massively. Now, I don't care if we leave Europe, as long as we leave it in a sensible way, keeping regulation and end up in some sort of quasi-Norway-type setup. But we absolutely have to, from a sustainability point of view, sink that agenda. And I think the only way that it can happen is actually the electorate wakes up and realises that the journey they've put us on is a disaster.
Any other thoughts? Before we wrap up, there's a question at the back. Yes, sir. We're going to get a microphone to you.
What you're saying is Brexit won't take place.
Well, there is no definition of Brexit, is there? So it makes it very difficult to answer your question. If by what do we mean? Do we mean a short, sharp, hard Brexit, which the Liam Foxes of this world wanted immediately after the referendum? Absolutely no. It's just too complex, too difficult, too stacked against us in every single possible way. The reality of it is just unpalatable unless you do this horrendous thing, and I just hope that that the electorate wakes up to what that vision really is all about.
Do you agree? It's helpful to know.
It was a wrong idea, so bad.
Yeah. Well, it was a lie. You build a manifesto on a lie, you cause all sorts of problems. Yeah, exactly.
So sadly, we're not a Brexit conference. We're a sustainable development in the food and drink beverage business conference. But that was good to hear.
Right. Well, it's hardly helping you.
Do people in this room realise that Ireland is England's 5th biggest customer?
Yeah.
5th biggest customer.
Yes.
Yep.
As an importer. As yours an exporter.
Yeah.
Any other comments on the floor or questions? If not, I'm going to move to wrap up. But that's been very helpful. Thank you.
Vice versa. We need your food.
Could you join me in just giving a warm vote of thanks to our panellists? Thank you. So if I may, does this work on both mics? Are we okay? Great, thanks. If I may, I'd just like to say a few just concluding words for our session today. Thank you for seeing us through to the end. It's been quite a long day, but we've heard just in this room alone from 17 separate individuals about a wide range of subjects. And I did actually make a note of just what we've been through. Thinking about it in supply chain terms, we've discussed today everything from agriculture through manufacturing, distribution, retail, and customers. In terms of topics, we've discussed supplier collaboration, energy management, continuous improvement, footprinting and labelling, organic and natural sourcing, anaerobic digestion, waste reduction and recycling, lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, public disclosure, and also got onto issues like sustainable development and how it impacts labour, our supply chain, Brexit, new American president and so on. I hope at the very least it's given people some food for thought about what to take back to their industry, to their business, to their organisation, and what to do differently over coming years. There's a whole host of ideas and opportunities at this conference, which hopefully you've had some exposure to. Just before concluding, I would like, if I may, just to thank obviously everybody here today for attending. Secondly, Food and Drink Business Europe for putting on this conference and for doing it for the third time running, which is of great credit, I think, to the organisation and their commitment to want to see this agenda grow. I'd like to thank our sponsors, just to recap, British Gas, the Carbon Trust, Aquabio, Harford Control and the Cranfield School of Management. And also to thank just everybody that's been involved in the organisation, Steve with the sound and the setup, and finally to you for coming. I would just recap on this core theme on which I started. Do take a look at the Food and Drink Federation new targets for 2025. They cover transport, value chain, natural capital, water and packaging. And they include specific objectives around CO2 with a 55% reduction in CO2 by 2025 and zero food waste to landfill from direct operations by 2025. So a challenging agenda for the industry, and those targets are set to be in alignment with the Courtauld commitment to contribute to the Paris Climate Change Convention, to contribute to the UN Global Sustainable Development Goals, and therefore quite a fundamental agenda of change for the food and drink industry. And I hope this conference has given people some ammunition to embrace their organisations, your organisations, in those changes and deliver further on sustainable development in the industry, because a lot's been done already, but there's a long way to go. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope it's been a good conference for everybody. Thank you.